Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Following Israel's parliamentary election last week, which surfaced the deep rifts within Israel's society, Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud won an impressive victory, garnering a quarter of Israel's Knesset seats. Netanyahu, who attained the support of 67 future Knesset members, received the task by President Reuven Rivlin to form Israel's 34th government coalition. With us in the studio are the number 31 in Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud list, Ms. Sharon Heskel. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'd like also to welcome Senior Advisor to Knesset member attained, the number 10 in the Zionist Union faction, Mr. Tamir Morag. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like also to welcome our TV7 analyst, Mati Shoshani.
It's good to be here.
Mati, the elections were heated elections this time. Mm-hmm. Give us some perspective of what happened.
Okay, let's just lay the foundation for our viewers. One, they need to know that in Israel, unlike most countries, Israel has a multi-partisan system. In other words, it's not just one party that wins. One party gets the majority of votes and then has the chance to form a coalition. We have 120 seats in our parliament called the Knesset, and they need to form at least a coalition of at least 61 seats to solidify their governance or their power. Benjamin Netanyahu's party, the Likud party, which ran under the name Machal, that's the name of the faction, they received the most seats. They received 30 seats in this Knesset. So they get the task, like you mentioned by President Rivlin, to go forth and set a coalition, which it seems they've already succeeded in doing.
All right. Ladies first, Mrs. Gill, you have almost gotten into the Knesset as well. Give us a little bit of an indication how your party found the surprising victory, if I may, in this last election.
Okay. Before starting, I would like, first of all, to really send my deep condolences to the families of the 149 passengers who crashed this week with the airplane. First of all, look, this week was a very exciting week. This surprising result is a result of a lot of really hard work of the past 3 months, and it was a journey. So it started from a really optimistic point of view, where we thought we'll get towards this direction, towards the 30 mandate. Slowly, while we had all the media against us, and we saw that there's a lot of foreign funds that are coming in with different organizations and are really pushing us, to our limit, we saw the mandate starting to drop. But then in the last 3 days, we really felt a huge waking up in the people in all around Israel. And all the candidates, we all received phone calls from all around the country asking us to come to home, to panels, to different places. People wanted to, hang signs and really to start being active. You could really feel that the field sort of like people waking up. And so we had, high hopes to receive, the results that we got.
All right. Mr. Morag, the failure, if I may state, of the left wing in Israel in general and the Zionist Union headed by Isaac Herzog and Tzipi Livni was very apparent when it seemed like the victory actually slipped through their fingers. What actually happened there?
Well, first of all, I think that the fact that people are talking about the failure of the left wing and the Zionist wing is the best evidence for the achievement that we had, because you have to remember that we had 15 seats in the previous Knesset and we're going to have 24 now. And only about 4 months ago we were heading down in the polls, maybe to a single-digit figure. So I'm not sure it's a failure, even though we were very disappointed in the night of the elections. I think that what happened is, I would like to split it to 2 parts. Mm-hmm. First of all, we have to think why we are unable to garner enough support in the periphery of Israel, outside Tel Aviv and the big cities. We have to think with ourselves. And we're gonna have a lot of discussions about it. We already have a lot of discussions about it. But the second part, I think, was because of the campaign that Mr. Netanyahu initiated in the day of the elections, a campaign that he already apologized for, when he stated that the Arabs are flocking to the polls, and it probably garnered a lot of the support from in the right wing to the Likud. I think it was inappropriate. I think it was even a bit racist, and I think Mr. Netanyahu acknowledged it when he apologized, but it did the work for him, and he won.
Well, from what I hear here, Mati, from both the spectrums of the political echelons, we see here right now a rift that is quite evident, both in the left and also in the right in Israel, which was a little bit in the back scenes for many, many years and now has really come forward. What can you tell us about that?
You raise a very interesting point. Israeli society, unlike many other societies, most countries have a somewhat homogenous society. They're from one ethnicity, one nationality, come from one nation. Israel is very different than that. And some of what we've been seeing now is this pendulum movement, which has happened in the past too, where people resort back to this almost ethnic accusation. You did this because you're from an Arab background. You did this because you're from a European background, and so on and so forth. But there's a deeper question in this whole thing, which is it's almost impossible to characterize Israeli society. And I'll explain. Many societies, you can say if you're left-wing, you believe X, Y, Z. If you're in the right, you believe that other set of beliefs. Israeli society doesn't work that way. And one of the things both of you mentioned is the polls. In Israeli society, up to a few days before the elections, there's about 20-something% of people who have not decided, undecided votes. And what they do as part of the reason we have this problem, they just take that 20% and sort of divide it the same way that everything else is divided. So you can't say everyone was really wrong. It's sort of, they just didn't read the map correctly. Now, I want to reference some of the campaigns that were going on here. A lot of people were saying, yes, there's foreign aid going to the left-wing organizations. The truth is there's foreign aid going to both sides, both the right wing and the left wing. Each one has its newspapers that are identified with it. The right wing identified newspaper, Israel Hayom, Israel Today, enlarged its distribution by over 100,000 copies a day. So, and someone's paying for that from abroad. So what happened on the election day, which is what you're mentioning, is this almost clash, and they were using everything they could bring to hand. Said, oh, the Arabs are doing this, the right is doing that, it's a last stand. That's not true. We've been going back and forth with these accusations, talking about ethnicity being the reason, the main cities compared to smaller peripheral cities. It's just, we're a very complex society, and when you try to predict elections, it just makes it almost impossible, and this is what happens.
Mrs. Skel, you care to comment?
Yes, when I hear this accusation saying, we won the election because Benjamin Netanyahu, on the day of the election, posted this video that had 10,000 views, really make me understand why the left were so surprised with our results. Look, we don't live on Facebook, and one of the problems with the campaign of the left is that it concentrated on the media inside the internet, on Facebook, what's happening on YouTube, okay? And you don't win elections with Facebook. The way you win elections is by going into the field, feeling the people, talking to the people, look what's happening in the Negev, in the Galil, in the periphery, and this is how you really win election. And so I completely disagree, and I understand the surprise of the left when they're saying that because of this YouTube video with 10,000 views, this is the reason why we won these elections.
I just want to correct, because I don't know if the YouTube video had 10,000 views, but it was cited all over the media and billions of Israelis heard about it.
Also sent out text messages and stuff like that. Yes, it reached a larger audience.
All right, please.
This was on the day of the elections, so we've been working really hard. This is a campaign that's been taking 3 months, and so by hard work, this is how you get to these results.
I just want to comment about Israeli media for a second, and for the sake of the viewers at home. There was a perception in Israeli society, especially if you read the newspapers, that the left was going to win. And that was just the sense. Everyone was saying, here it's going to happen, Netanyahu's going down, it's done, his reign is over, and so on and so forth. And then election day came and it didn't happen. And I think that's part of the huge shock. And part of the reason is, of course, that the media is more left-wing oriented, so they didn't have the pulse of that right-wing section of the people. It's just important to note.
Mr. Morag, would you like to comment?
Yeah, and also I think that there was an atmosphere that the left is stronger than it used to be, which is probably true. Not probably, we can see it in the election results.
Even though, if you look at the polls, you were talking about the great success of the 15 to the 24, which is undoubtedly a big raise in the number of seats in the Knesset. But nonetheless, those seats came also from the laborers or the Zionist unions, natural partners, if you calculate all the losses on the other hand. So the addition of just 2 polls doesn't seem to me as a great success, does it?
No, I think that if you're gonna split it to right and left, and the parties in the middle, so you're gonna see that the difference in the number of votes is about 200 or 250,000. It depends if you're gonna take Yesh Atid, Yair Lapid, Meretz, the Zionist Union, and on the left, and then you're going to take Likud and the Jewish Home, Naftali Bennett's party, and the ultra-religious parties, and then you're going to put Kahlon, Kulanu party in the middle. You're going to see that the difference is no more than a quarter million of votes. Oh, and I forgot also the Arab list, the United Arab list. So I think there is. The public is tired of Benjamin Netanyahu, but his success wasn't in bringing voters from the left to the right, but in taking voters from within the right wing to his own party, from Naftali Bennett, from Eli Yishai, who didn't even get the threshold and remained outside the Knesset, from Lieberman and Israel Beitenu, his party. That was his big success. We actually received what we expected to receive. 24 seats is more or less what everybody predicted we were going to get. The surprise was that Likud got 30 and Bennett got 8. He started the campaign, I want to remind you, is about 17 or 18. That was the big success that Netanyahu had. The division between right and left in Israel, I think, is still tending a bit to the right, but it's very close to 50-50 or 55-45.
I'm not sure you can actually put Yair Lapid in the left-wing spectrum of the political fields here in Israel, but nonetheless, would you like to comment?
Yes, first of all, it's wrongfully to say that the people of Israel don't want Benjamin Netanyahu as the prime minister. One of every 4 people who went to vote chose Benjamin Netanyahu as their prime minister. Therefore, they want him as their prime minister. Second of all, look, what you were talking about the media, you've divided it into 2. There's the social media, which the left really hold there. He lives in the social media. And the way the social media works is that its advertising is targeted. You see there whatever you want to see. So when the left watch all the advertising and all the posts, they only see the left-wing post, only the left-wing advertising, and so they don't see the whole pictures. More than that, the media itself was left. They were trying to make a change here. They were trying to change the government from Benjamin Netanyahu to the left. And that was really felt within the people of Israel as well. Even if you would take the newspaper Yediot Acharonot, which is one of the biggest newspaper, and a smaller newspaper but more left-wing, Haaretz, you could see how more objective is the more left, which is not as much read Haaretz, how much more objective it is compared to Yediot Acharonot, which every single report that was there was why Benjamin Netanyahu shouldn't be the prime minister, who is accusing him of what and what is happening. And they weren't really discussing the core issues, what the people are talking about, what they really need. And I think this is part of the biggest fault that the left was doing.
Mati?
I think what Sharon mentions is key to understanding the political system in Israel right now, is which no one was discussing the big issues. That's the truth, and this isn't the first or the second elections that we haven't discussed the big issues. A lot of the political discourse, both on social media and in the newspapers, has been on the scandal level or the superficial, like slogan level. Things like just addressing the housing, just the Iranian bomb, just all
recycling bottles.
Yeah, something, some ridiculous and trivial perceived scandal that has to do with Netanyahu's wife or something like that. So they never really went into the deep issues. We didn't have a discussion. This is, by the way, all the parties are to blame for this. We didn't have a deep discussion of here's where we're going as a people. Let's try to get there together. Let's talk about our goals as a nation. Let's see how we reform the political system. We never got there. And another big issue with these elections is that, and this problem has been growing through elections, not getting smaller, is that we have a big block of central parties. And those central parties come up and down, and this is the nature of them. They're up on the first elections, then they go down the next, and then they disappear essentially from the pages of history in our Knesset. So we had Yesh Atid, we had the Jewish Home, Beit Yehudi, and they sort of went down, but then Kachlon came up with 10 seats, which is a party that ran on the sole statement that they're going to make financial issues better without actually saying how they're going to do that. And then here's an example of how problematic the discourse was. Netanyahu's party, the Likud, refused to state throughout the elections what their agenda was. They didn't publish policy papers. When they went on the radio, they would not say, we're going to do this. They said, our actions speak for themselves. This was the statement. So it kept the whole discussion on the superficial level. And again, we're dealing with all these small parties, small problems, small parties, and it just changes from election to election. It's a very...
Yeah, I generally agree, and maybe the best evidence for that is the fact that the most effective act in this campaign wasn't some kind of a new policy initiative or whatever. It was what Netanyahu did during election day when he said the Arabs are flocking to the polls, and that did the work for him. No.
I'm, by the way, not sure that that's factually true. I mean, people say that that's swung all those people. They might have gone and voted just as much without him saying that. To be entirely honest.
Please.
When we were going through this campaign, we were trying to bring all the social issues, the economical agendas, and the security agendas of the Likud. This is stated in our treaty of the party. And it says what is our ideology and what is our goal. And by that, this is how we are going to work. More than that, we were showing a lot of achievement that we have done in the past 6 years. And so the people of Israel have seen those changes happening. They've seen that it's been a little bit better than before. And so I believe that they trust more the Likud that comes with real solution. Benjamin Netanyahu, in a lot of his videos, if you go on his page, he states what is his solution for the problem of housing, for example, or for many different problems. And so we were trying to bring up this conversation. And I think the people of Israel, the real people, because we've been just going from place to place, from school to school, from city to city, to really talk to the people and bring that to them. And I really believe that they've listened, and they do see the Likud as the one to bring the solutions to it, because we've proven ourselves and because we're bringing a real solution.
But you've been in power for the last 6 years, and you mentioned housing, and the housing market is insane in Israel. It's impossible for a young couple to buy an apartment. So we've been in the opposition. You've been here for the past 6 years, and no solution, no results. And I also want to mention that in all of the polls, if I'm not mistaken, then correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I don't, Netanyahu's approval rating is less than 50%. So if you would go to the US...
Well, who would you vote for as a leader between Netanyahu and Herzog?
Netanyahu was on 46%.
Yeah,
He's still higher,
was
but
like
his
10%
approval
below.
is less than 50.
Yeah.
Now the system here allows a leader who enjoys less than 50% approval rating to be elected. If you would go to another system like in the US, where you have a bipartisan system, so a candidate with less than 50% approval ratings usually lose. So I think there is a base for the argument that the people are at least to some extent tired of Netanyahu, but perhaps they didn't, we weren't efficient enough in delivering our message.
Nonetheless, out of all the political spectrum, Netanyahu was still the highest in the percentage of the way Israelis view the leader of the State of Israel. I would like to move to the next point. We're now having 42 days, a little bit less, in which Netanyahu is expected to form a government. This coalition will be very difficult for him, as there are different parties with different ideologies and different thoughts for the future. How do you think that Netanyahu will deal with all those obstacles in the future?
Look, I think that the government that Netanyahu is trying to form right now has more ideological joint ground than what it was the last one. Okay, so most of the parties that are joining now into the government, from what we are seeing that he's forming, have more right agendas, economical right-wing agenda, and security, right-wing agendas. So I think it would be easier to run the government and to pass different legislations and law.
Mr. Mulak?
Well, I'm not really sure what's going to be the next coalition. I'm not sure Netanyahu knows right now. It seems as if he's going to a narrow right-wing coalition, but some of his partners have demands that I'm not sure he can give them. For example, you have Avigdor Lieberman with 6 seats in the Knesset demanding to be the Minister of Defense. Mm-hmm. You never had anything like that in the history of the political system in Israel. And my guess is that at one point or another, he's going to have difficulties in forming this right-wing coalition, and he is at least going to approach Herzog. If I have to estimate, I estimate that eventually we will stay in the opposition, because I don't see how we and Netanyahu can agree on the policies of the next government, but I don't think it's going to be easy for him, and I think that there will be negotiations at some point after Netanyahu will approach Herzog on a national unity government.
Mati?
Well, Netanyahu's back in his comfort zone, which is a traditional right-wing coalition with the Orthodox. And what that gives, just again to explain this to our viewers at home, it gives his coalition the stability of having people who want to be in the coalition. What we had in the previous coalition were several up-and-coming leaders, up-and-coming parties who had their grounds to prove. They had to prove their value to their voters. So on every issue, they would fight it, till the end, or till they, won the media battle on the topic. Right now, that's not the case. A lot of these people who are in the coalition need to get back in power. The Shas party has to get back in power. The Orthodox have to remain in power. Their mere existence, politically speaking, depends on them getting back into those, the finance committee or these different committees or offices that they had in the past that gets the money or the resources to their electorate. That's one thing. And the second thing is the coalition doesn't have to be especially wide. If it's stable, it doesn't really matter how wide it is or not. Mm-hmm. If they're above 61 seats, they're good, as long as the coalition doesn't fall apart. And at the same time, we're seeing, and this is just history in Israel, the term of the government is supposed to be 4 years. We haven't gone to 4 years. Traditionally, the average is about 2.7 years now. What is it, 2.4, 2.7?
There's only been one government.
Yeah, and again, so if you look statistically, regardless of how it looks today, after a couple of years in the government, everyone starts to see if they can gain anything by going to elections. Mm-hmm. And it happens, someone finds an excuse to blow up the deal, and we go to elections again, and they hope to. Right now, a lot of the parties you mentioned, Lieberman, for instance, can't afford to go to elections. We go to elections, he's gone. He's off the table. A lot of the other parties can't afford to go to elections, so at least we have stability for a while, for the time being.
One moment. I would like actually to move on because we don't have very much time on the matter. Mrs. Gill, you were also talking about the grassroots ideology, which all the parties right now that are potentially going to be part of this coalition have together. And one of the issues is the international community, which is also closely viewing what's happening here in the State of Israel. And in all previous governments, we could always see this one party which had some kind of affiliation to centrist left or somewhere to a peace ideology, which this specific government doesn't have. How are you going to tackle that issue?
What do you mean? You mean that there's not a left-wing
there is
agenda
no
inside the
prospects of a two-state solution, of negotiations with the Palestinians. if we can look at the history, in the past government there was Tzipi Livni,
Look,
so on and so forth.
Netanyahu went and spoke as well and explained, the big picture of what he was saying about the Palestinian conflict. And look, we believe he stated that he believes that there should be two states, while one of them is demilitarized with the Palestinians. He didn't went back on what he said on the speech of Bar Ilan. What he meant is that the reality today has changed. And so the solution that was before not necessarily is possible in these days. Okay? It means that, first of all, the Palestinians authority now is joined with Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, and they refuse to recognize Israel as a Jewish state, which means we cannot sit down and discuss a peace agreement if they don't want peace, if they do not want Israel to be a Jewish state, or if they cannot state that. Second of all, the problems of the Arab Spring that has brought instability to the whole region had changed the reality here as well. We've seen before and we know now that every territory that we are going to vacate might be caught with a terrorist group or a terrorist organization. And this is really dangerous for the Israelis. Plus, we understand the risks with Iran and what's happening with Iran. And in all of this reality, we need to understand that the first thing is to keep the security of Israel. We need to stay safe here. And so the agreement, if there will be able to be an agreement, has to stand on this base that we as a country will stay safe and the people of Israel will be safe in this country.
Right. Mr. Millar?
Well, to be honest, I don't know what kind of coalition Netanyahu even wants. Even if we ignore what the political reality is going to force him, I'm not sure if we are dealing with the Benjamin Netanyahu prior to the elections, 2 days before the elections, when he said he is against the two-state solution, or the Benjamin Netanyahu who said after the elections he is for the two-state solution. And I'm not sure that even if he has the option of forming a narrow right-wing government, this is his preferable option. He's going to be in a very difficult spot when he faces the international community, and he might want to, even if he doesn't have to, join some more moderate parties to his next coalition.
Mati, we don't have much time. Give us
as I always say, international
summary.
relations run deeper than the nature of the Israeli parliament at any given time. America, even under Obama, who's perceived to be negative, has given Israel more money and backed us more than anyone else in a very long time. The European Union, the UN, regardless of the situation here, are still going to say things that are negative about Israel. So really, in all truth, it doesn't matter that much who's in power and the nature of the coalition. That's the truth.
All right. Well, Ms. Sharon Heskel, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting
Mr. Tamir Morag, it's been a pleasure. Mati, it's always a pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to thank our viewers, and we will see you next time.